Every drop of water is part of a journey. It begins as water vapor that falls to earth as rain. For the next 25 years, it's filtered through volcanic rock. At last, it arrives at its final destination. Really? Can somebody come fix this?
When it comes to water, don't waste a drop. You don't have to go to extremes to save water. For easy water-saving tips, visit boardofwatersupply.com.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Always great to see all of you. This is the May 28th, 2019, and what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be having a public hearing followed by a regular meeting of the Board of Water Supply. Unbelievable, almost half the year gone. But we'd like to get started by doing, for today, we may have to reshuffle and reorder the agenda and take things out of order. And I'll let you know when that might be due to some scheduling matters. But we will be starting with the public hearing this afternoon. And so this is for, the public hearing is in regards to the proposed fiscal year 2020, which runs from July 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2020 inclusive. And this is for the operating as well as the capital improvement program budget of the Board of Water Supply. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And the purpose, again, today is to consider the 2019-2020 operating and CIP budgets. A notice of the public hearing appeared in the May 18, 2019 Honolulu Star Advertiser newspaper. Before beginning today's public hearings, I'd like to state that this board is dedicated to the provision of a safe, dependable, and affordable supply of water to our customers. One of the best ways we can ensure that this occurs is to thoughtfully plan and fund a regular program of water facility replacement and improvement as reflected in the annual operating and CIP program budgets we are considering today. On May 13, 2019, this board held a budget informational meeting. This meeting outlined the department's goals and objectives and the proposed operating and CIP budgets for fiscal year 2019 to 2020. Before officially opening this public hearing today, I'd like to ask Mr. Ernest Lau, Manager and Chief Engineer of the Board of Water Supply, to give a brief statement on the budget we are considering today.
Thank you, Chair. It is my pleasure to actually be able to present the operating budget and capital improvement program budget for FY 2020. We'll be having Robert Morita lead the budget presentation shortly. But basically, the operating budget that we're talking about proposed for next fiscal year is around $204 million. It's about 9.7% more than our current year's budget of $186 million. Our CIP is also proposed for FY20 at $166 million, actually 20.1% higher than the previous year, which is FY19 CIP of $138 million. So in total, what we're asking the board to consider at the regular meeting is action on the on the proposed operating budget and the CIP. But during this public hearing, we're taking public testimony on our proposed budgets. So without further ado, I'll let us get the show on the road here with Mr. Robert Morita, head of our Executive Support Office, doing the presentation on the proposed FY 2020 budget. I'd just like to say, as I said at the budget workshop, this will be Robert's last year with us. He is going to be retiring shortly, and I just want to acknowledge his great work here at the Board of Water Supply. I really appreciate what Robert has done growing and leading our Executive Support Office and getting our whole budget automated into a budget management system, an application that under his leadership, was developed here at the BWS. So without further ado, thank you, Robert. Good job, and carry it away.
Oh, thank you very much. Wow. Well, just to let you know, that was probably like the 4th budget system I've done, so I've had plenty of practice. So today we are here to present the fiscal year 2020 operating and capital improvement program budget for the Board of Water Supply. Oh, and I didn't do this the last time, but I want to make sure that I recognize Stuart Wong. He's the budget program specialist for Board of Water Supply. Stuart does the heavy lifting when it comes to the budget itself. So he does both the budget as well as the revenue projections as well. So he is the brains behind a lot of the numbers here that you see in the presentations today. I just basically get to read it to you. But without Stuart's help, my job would be a lot more difficult. So, and in my absence, Stuart will be taking on the leadership role a lot more until a successor is brought on board. So be kind to Stuart. We would all appreciate that. So as Manager Lau mentioned, the fiscal year 2020 operating and capital improvement program budget is, for the operating budget, it is $18.1 million or 9.7% over fiscal year 19. And the capital improvement program budget is $27.8 million or about 20.1% over the current fiscal year. The numbers that you see in the budget, they are consistent with the long-range financial plan, and we'll show you that in a couple of slides a little bit later. And the one thing that we wanted to note in this particular budget is that the Board of Water Supply intends to issue revenue bonds. And this is a bit of a big deal because this will be the first time since fiscal year 2006 that the board has issued revenue bonds for new funds. We've done refunding of higher interest rate loans in the past, in 2012 and 14 specifically. But this will be the first time since 06 that we've gone ahead and issued new funds. We anticipate the bond issuance to be at about $150 million, but that will be a separate matter that will be brought to the board. And that $150 million approximately will be used to finance two fiscal years worth of capital projects. And so it's not just a single year, but just bear in mind that it's a 2-year issue. In terms of revenue, we project about a $7 million increase over fiscal year 19, or about a 2.9% increase. And that's in comparison to the $18.1 million, 9.7% increase over on the operating expenditure side. So for this slide, we've shown this similar slide in the past. And what this outlines is basically how the Board of Water Supply, and this applies to all jurisdictions, how we rely on the ending or the carryover fund balance from each fiscal year to become part of the revenue stream for the coming budget year. And so as you can see here in the first column in FY 2018, that's based on actuals, we started with $121.3 million of carryover funds from the prior fiscal year. So that was basically our beginning fund balance. So in there you add the revenues you collected during the year and the expenses you incurred during the year. And at the end, we were left with $86.6 million a significant decrease in the ending balance. And while this may appear to be troubling, this was fully intentional in that in prior budgets, it was brought up by the board as well as by management that the fund balances were getting, let's just say, uncomfortably high. And we had not yet had the full long-range financial plan put into place. So the decision at that time was to really focus in on the budget, to right-size it, while at the same time being able to fund a more robust capital improvement program budget. So what we did at that time was made a more conscientious shift to look for savings within the operating budget to tighten that up. And whatever funds that were remaining, we would shift that into the capital program so that we could finance more projects. And so this is the effects of that particular effort. And so now, as you can see, we are projecting to start the fiscal year 2020 budget with about a $69.7 million fund balance starting in, and we project it to end at about 33.6. Typically, that's conservative, and so we like to make sure that we have a certain margin of safety. But at 33.6 even, that would be a comfortable number in that we could use that as a starting point for the subsequent fiscal year. As mentioned, that decision to focus in on the fund balances was consciously made. And since that time, the board did adopt the financial policies of the Board of Water Supply. And so one component is the debt service coverage ratio, which says that effectively in our fund balances, we shall have at least 1.6 times the amount of our debt service for that particular budget year. That's effectively what that policy says. And so we've met that with the fiscal year 2020 budget. There's also a provision in there for working capital. The eventual target, and it's been stated that within 10 years, we want to be able to have a working capital or effectively a cash balance of an equivalent of 180 working days, operating days, about a half a year's worth of funding. So that this is twofold. One is it puts the Board of Water Supply in a much stronger position should there be any type of disaster, say for example, a Puerto Rico type hurricane situation where we are not able to collect on revenues for a certain amount of time. This 180 days would give us at least that much cushion and so that we would be able to continue to deliver the services and pay our employees until Oahu got back on its feet and we were able to start rebilling customers for services. What it also does is it puts us in a much stronger cash position, so when we do go out for additional bond issues, that's also looked upon favorably by the bond rating agencies. But we do have a minimum in there in that we shall have no less than 60 days of working capital. And with this budget, we've achieved that. This is the allocation of the fiscal year 2020 budget. So as you can see here, 17% is for our personnel services. Material service, supplies and services is 26%. Equipment is at 3%. Debt service is at 8%. Fixed charges is 18%, and fixed charges is the largest components are electricity, the retirement system, and health benefits. We still do have some cash going into the capital improvement programs in addition to bonds. That's 27% of our operating fund expenditures. And we do have in there $500,000 for waivers of the water system facility charge. This shows you a year-over-year comparison of the fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20 budget. So basically what you can see here is that the two biggest drivers in the increase in budget comes from the materials, supplies, and services category, as well as the fixed charges. And we'll cover that in a slide or two shortly. So as we mentioned, the budget did increase looking at fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 20. But prior to this, in our effort to right size, the operating budget was on a downward trend. And this was again, this was a concerted effort to right-size the budget, to make sure that we were budgeting for things that we felt that we could achieve during that fiscal year. As much as we would like to, this is not a sustainable path. We can't continue to only decrease the budget. But with the increases in the fiscal year 2020 budget, even with those additions, we are still below what we had budgeted for in fiscal year 2017. And so the decreases, as mentioned, the decreases were shifted to the CIP budget in the past, and so this is the result where you can see that the CIP budget has now had a marked increase in funding. And this, again, is consistent with our Water Master Plan, Long-Range Financial Plan, and our effort to get to 21 miles of replacement pipeline within 10 years. So for highlights of the operating budget, in terms of salaries, we are not asking for any increase in full-time equivalent counts. The count remains at 741 FTE. In terms of dollars, there's a slight increase of about $247,000 in salaries. That effectively is the effects of collective bargaining, the full year effect of some of the latest collective bargaining increases reflected in fiscal year 2020 over FY19. This was brought up at the budget workshop, asking about initiatives on the human resources and personnel side. So as far as initiatives go, we've looked at optimizing available staffing. So basically looking at using whatever vacant positions that we don't feel are the most critical, and in turn using them in exchange, in place of more critical positions that are needed going forward. So we're trying to live within our means, trying to live within the current employee headcount that we've been given through the budget, rather than just coming forward and just simply asking for more and more positions each year. We try to look within first. Expanding operational capacity through leveraging of technology. In the FY20 budget, there's also a development of an HR strategic plan being planned for, and there's also participation in the Society for Human and Resource Management, or SHRM, conferences to explore new strategies for recruitment and succession planning. Under the material services and supplies category, there's $2.2 million to replace an RO line for the recycled water system, $2 million to conduct a TCP advanced treatment study, and $2 million for contractual services for drinking water system and vulnerability risk assessment and water resource protection. Continuing on, $1.5 million in funding for emergency road repairs and BWS facility pavement repairs, and $1.2 million for consultant services to upgrade the instrumentation and controls for the water distribution system. In equipment, in the budget, there's $1.2 million more for new and replacement vehicles. And in addition to that, there is $700,000 for 2 mobile generators. And these generators are eligible for 75% FEMA reimbursement. Under fixed charges, there's $1.8 million. There's a $1.8 million increase in employees' retirement system costs, and $2 million more for electricity expenses. Again, a year-over-year comparison of the operating fund expenditures. And as you can see, I think the biggest thing to note is in the final 2 columns, FY20, FY19, that yellow section at the very top, that's the capital budget. So prior to fiscal year 20, that was all cash funded. And that's what this chart is showing. So you notice the smaller block in FY20, because what this chart does not show is the amount that's being funded with bonds, with revenue bonds. So effectively, this is all of our cash spending in the past. For revenues, our water sales are projected to be relatively flat in comparison to fiscal year 19. There is the scheduled water rate increase beginning in July of 2019, which will affect our fiscal year 2020 budget. And any increase that's budgeted in the in the fiscal year 20 budget is reflective of that rate increase. In terms of resources versus expenditures, what we wanted to show is that basically these two charts show you that the revenue versus expenditures, revenues do exceed expenditures, and as a budget basic, that's really what you want. You want your revenues to exceed your expenditures. But what this also shows on the revenue side, and what we're reflecting as revenues is fund balances. So that sort of, what color is that? Reddish, salmon color. That reflects the fund balances. So previous slides I mentioned about the bond coverage fund balance, as well as the working capital fund, working capital account. That in fiscal year 20, the $69.7 million is basically reflective of those two totals. And showing the breakdown of those fund balances, this chart shows how our fund balances are looking over the various previous fiscal years. So what we're trying to do going forward over the next 8 to 10 years is that lighter blue section where there's working capital. We are trying to grow that amount slowly to achieve the equivalent amount of 180 working days of working capital. There was a question at the budget workshop about our debt service, and we added this slide in order to show what the current debt looks like. So current outstanding debt, which is revenue bonds only, is $224.3 million in outstanding debt. What we're calling outstanding notes is the state revolving fund amounts, loans from the state, totaling $64.3 million. The current debt service for both revenue bonds and state revolving funds is $21.2 million. And in taking out that anticipated $150 million for the next 2 fiscal years in revenue bonds, this is the impact to the debt service amounts paid annually. So in FY20, we expect the debt service amount to increase by $0.8 million. And the reason that's so small is that the bond issue will actually happen later, in the latter part of the fiscal year. The heavier part will be showing up in the fiscal year 21 budget of about $7.3 million, increase over 20, and in 22, which will be $2.7 million more than fiscal year 21. So in total, the debt service impact is about $10 million in total. And just to point this out, to refresh your memory, so there was a long-range financial plan. It was adopted through resolution number 886 in 2018. That it was fully laid out that in about fiscal year 20, that we were going to see the situation where expenditures were going to outshine, outrise, overtake the revenue side of it. And so this is where the proposal that we were going to look at revenue bonds to make up the difference, especially specifically for the capital improvement program budget. And so with that going forward, the plan was always been to assume that 50% of our capital improvement program would be budgeted by cash, the other 50% by revenue bonds. So this is all available on the website. I took these 2 particular graphics from the long-range financial plan summary that's on the Board of Water Supply website. And so now we're going to move into the capital improvement program budget, but I know I went through that kind of quick. I don't know if there's any questions from the board members that we can answer at this time. Okay, if not, we will switch things up a little bit. Usually I call up Jason Takaki to go over the capital budget, but this time we wanted to ask Barry Usagawa to come up and cover some of the conditions the assumptions going forward for the Board of Water Supply in terms of its long-range planning and how all of that ties into the current capital improvement program budget that we're presenting.
As you know, Barry Usaga is the head of our Water Resources Division, so, Barry?
Thank you, Robert. The FY 2020 CIP does support the BWS vision and mission of Water for Life, safe, dependable, and affordable water now into the future. And it is aligned with the strategic plan and the division's goals and objectives and the 6-year capital improvement program. So what does that mean? The annual CIP is a product of several strategic initiatives that align with the BWS mission, vision, and strategic plan in a concentric circle like that. Among them are the Water Master Plan that was adopted in 2016, along with the 30-year CIP, or what we called then the Infrastructure Investment Plan. Also tied in is the Long-Range Financial Plan, the Regional Watershed Management Plans, the Water Conservation Plan, and the Energy Savings Program. And in the future, other initiatives will also drive the results that you will see in the annual budget, the CIP budget. The Water Master Plan evaluated the entire water system for condition assessment based on risk, and we define risk as the consequence of failure times the likelihood of failure. The annual CIP reflects the highest priority projects identified in the Water Master Plan effort. Would also like to note that the Water Conservation Plan has driven a 30-year reduction in water use, thereby freeing up existing water system capacity that addresses growth and resiliency. The capacity expansion projects that you find in this year's CIP is only approximately 15% of the total costs because of the conservation savings. So what about climate change? The Water Research Foundation, we partnered with the Water Research Foundation in 2015 to conduct a vulnerability assessment. The Water Research Foundation is one of the top research organizations for everything water in the nation. And so in 2015, we co-funded this vulnerability assessment study through their tailored collaboration program. The vulnerability assessment approach based upon climate change projections and sea level rise, specifically potential impacts to BWS facilities and infrastructure for each of the identified sea level rise hazards, which is coastal erosion, marine inundation, and groundwater inundation, and their impact on our facilities, pipelines, pump stations, and other facilities from an affected sea level rise of 3 feet by 2100. And for temperature and rainfall, we looked at impacts to the WAU's water resources and the effects on our water sources. We expect increased temperatures, declining rainfalls, especially in leeward Oahu, and the reduction in recharge that will impact the aquifer sustainable yields, water use permit allocations, and water demands. In addition, the BWS has joined the Water Utility Climate Alliance Network, which is comprised of 12 of the nation's largest water providers that collectively supply drinking water to more than 50 million people in the United States. WUCA, as they call themselves, is dedicated to provide leadership and collaboration on climate adaptation issues to ensure that water utilities are well positioned to respond to climate change within the context of water management decision making. So our intent is to, in effect, monitor the pulse of the nation's progress toward climate change adaptation and to fold that into our long-range planning. With that, I will turn it over to Jason, who will then walk you through the CIP.
Thank you. Jason Takaki, head
Thanks,
of our
Barry.
Capital Projects Division.
Chair Andaya and board members. This year's $166.3 million capital improvement program carefully balances the requirements of ensuring safe and dependable water delivery with cost-effective resource allocation. As in previous years, the organization of the CIP is unchanged. It's in 3 categories. Research and development explores new resources and provides for system improvement needs. $6.25 million is proposed in this category. Renewal and replacement addresses the needs of the existing water infrastructure. $115.9 million is proposed in this category. And finally, the 3rd category is capacity expansion, and $21.8 million is proposed for these projects. This slide provides a matrix of the project categories and the sources of funding. $69.1 million will be provided from the operating fund. An additional $8.3 million in operating fund will be appropriated for projects that are SRF eligible and can be funded through low-interest loans from the Safe Drinking Water State Revolving Fund administered by the State Department of Health. $23.7 million will be provided from the Special Expendable Fund. And finally, $65.3 million will be provided from proceeds of a planned bond issuance that Mr. Morita referred to earlier. This graph illustrates the volume of this year's proposed CIP in relation to past years and the department's performance in encumbering the annual CIP budgeted amounts. We thought this would be a good time to tie some of the HR information that Mr. Morita provided earlier to the CIP. Now, throughout the development of the Water Master Plan, we have simultaneously been working to address the challenges of implementation. Following a detailed needs assessment, we optimized and documented work processes and implemented a number of initiatives to ensure operational efficiency. Now, key personnel categories that we need for the CIP, engineers and construction inspectors, are designated as shortage categories in civil service. To extend the capacity of our staff, we introduced project coordinators. These are paraprofessionals to improve the efficiencies of our engineering and construction inspection staff. Project coordinators are common in private industry, but not so in government. We modified the position description of an engineering support technician and continue to build a core of project coordinators. We extended our reach for construction inspectors by lowering the entry level, and we've successfully recruited construction inspector aides. We established key contacts with the University of Hawaii and the Honolulu Community College as promising sources for future recruits of graduates and student interns. We continue to increase staff capabilities using on-demand procurement and contract management training and enlisting professional construction management services for on-the-job training. We continue to explore procurement alternatives and implemented a comprehensive project management information system called Manao. The Manao system will track project execution and improve predictability of project delivery. Once the project mix in the infrastructure investment plan that Barry mentioned earlier was fully defined, a thoughtful, gradual schedule of staffing requirements could be formulated. And we have been successful in recruitment and continue on target with our staffing schedule. So back to the CIP. This slide illustrates the distribution of this year's projects around the island of Oahu as we manage and maintain an island-wide water infrastructure. This map is reproduced on the far wall with more detail on the project locations. Our division heads and staff officers are here to describe in greater detail any specific project in the FY20 CIP, but I will first present the highlights of our proposed capital improvement program. In Category 1, Research and Development, we will continue, as I mentioned, using construction management services for selected projects to increase our capabilities and capitalize on training opportunities to increase in-house construction management competencies. Additional groundwater monitoring wells are planned for Halava Valley to check for possible aquifer contamination. We will video log, clean, clear, and test the Wailine Nui well and prepare an environmental assessment for the possible development of a site for 3 reservoirs to add up to 8.5 million gallons of storage to the 180 system. In Category 2, renewal and replacement, we address the needs of the existing infrastructure. We will replace pumping units at Mililani Wells 2 and Ho'ai'ai Wells. We will renovate the Waipahu Wells 1 facility and continue with more pump renewal and replacement projects to address the needs of the system identified by our engineers and the Water System Operations Division. Category 2, renewal and replacement, is also pipeline and includes the needs of an aging water main infrastructure. Our largest asset is the underground transmission and distribution system, and just over $53 million are allocated for pipelines. 8.3 miles of main replacement are scheduled for FY20 construction in areas including Kamehameha Heights and Makakilo. And this is in line with our target of 21 miles of main replacement per year by FY27. In support of an expanding pipeline construction program, new pipeline replacement design projects will be initiated for 15.6 miles of water mains to address aging infrastructure in areas ranging from Ewa Beach to Kaneohe to Hauula. For your information, there are currently 13.3 miles of pipeline construction currently underway island-wide. Category 2, renewal and replacement, also includes the appurtenances of a robust water system. In FY20, we will address needed improvements to the Moanalua and Quarry pipeline tunnel, continue our program to replace plastic service laterals that have prematurely reached the end of their service lives. The sketch there in the bottom right shows a service lateral which connects the water main in the street to the water meter in front of your home. We have learned that the plastic material previously used becomes brittle with age and cracks, resulting in service leaks. This year, 338 laterals will be replaced in the Waipio and Waikele areas. We will also continue with improvements to our granular activated carbon water treatment facilities to extend their service lives. Finally, in renewal and replacement, we will continue with phase 2 of our water meter transponder replacement efforts, continue our efforts to safeguard all BWS facilities. We'll make long-needed improvements to the Beretania complex, specifically the exterior of this public service building, as well as continue upkeep of our reservoirs, pump stations, and other facilities. Finally, the capacity expansion category includes these projects. Metro 180 storage will be supplemented with a new 2 million gallon reservoir on the slopes of Papakolea. We will also increase source capacity in the Metro 180 system with a new Wailai West well station. And we will improve service reliability within the Mililani water system with a new Mililani 994 booster station. So these are the highlights of the FY20 CIP. As I said at the beginning, our division heads and staff officers are here to provide greater detail on any specific projects. And so I'll open up to questions at this time.
Are there any questions? Thank you.
Then let me turn it back over to Mr. Morita to summarize. Thank you.
All right, so in summary, the total combined budget for the operating and CIP budget is $370.7 million. And we've discussed the individual components. The operating budget increases by 18.1. The CIP budget increases by $27.8 million for a total increase of $45.9 million or 14.1% over fiscal year 19. We explained the various needs that are being addressed through the budget in the operating budget highlights as well as in the capital improvement program budgets. So at this time, I think that concludes the presentation piece of it. If there are any questions, I turn this back to Chair Andai.
Members, any questions? Not, thank you, Mr. Morita. And this being a public hearing, I want to give you a hard time.
Sure.
It's his last meeting today.
This is your last meeting. All right, Mr. Lau, any other thing before I open up the?
No,
For testimony?
we're available to answer any questions and look forward to the opening of the public testimony stage of the meeting, of the hearing.
All right, great, thank you, Mr. Morita. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will now take testimony on the proposed budget. Although this is the second time that this presentation has been made, we wanted to afford the public an opportunity to participate and for any input that the public may have. Due to time constraints, however, we ask that those presenting testimonies please limit your presentations to 3 minutes each. The public hearing is now open. If anyone wishes to testify on the proposed budget, please come forward and state your name and the organization you represent before proceeding with your testimony. Right, going once. Going twice. Was there anyone who signed up for testimony this afternoon?
No one registered.
Okay, given that there's been no registered speakers and that there are no speakers that have come forward despite multiple calls to do so, if there is no further testimony on the proposed budget, the public hearing is now closed.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. At this time, we'd like to proceed with our regular meeting of the Board of Water Supply. I think at this time, we do expect Member Sword to return shortly. Believe it would be prudent to perhaps go to the items for information before taking the action items, although I think we can certainly take the action items now.
You do have adequate quorum at this point?
Okay, maybe to keep it simpler and so that we don't forget to take action. Take
Please
the
don't.
action items now.
Don't forget.
All right, well, the first item requiring board action this afternoon is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held on April 22nd, 2019.
Motion to approve.
Okay, moved and seconded to approve the minutes for the April 22nd, 2019 meeting. Is there any discussion or any corrections or amendments? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right, the minutes of April 22nd, 2019 are approved. Moving on to the next item is the approval of the minutes of the budget workshop meeting.
So moved.
Okay, moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the budget workshop meeting held on May 13, 2019. Is there any discussion at this time? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right, finally, given our budget workshop held on May 13, along with the presentations today from the department and the public hearing that we just held, we do have resolution number 896, 2019. This is adopting the operating and capital improvement program budget for the fiscal year 2019-2020 and appropriating funds therefore. Is there a motion for adoption?
So moved.
All right, moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on this matter of the operating and capital improvement program budget? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right, the resolution number 896, 2019 is hereby adopted.
Thank you.
All right, moving right along here, we've got several items for information. First is a capital improvement program quarterly update. Chair recognizes Mr. Jason Takaki.
Good afternoon again, Chair Andaya and board members. The Capital Improvement Program quarterly update is for the third quarter of the FY19 fiscal year ending March 31st, 2019. It includes all divisions. There is a total of $14.6 million in contracts encumbered during the quarter, bringing the fiscal year total to $20.6 million. So there is a great deal of projects remaining, but they are well underway in the current fourth quarter of FY19. There was also $1.6 million in projects completed during the same quarter. And the detail of awards and completions are on the next page of the report. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Members, any questions regarding the CIP status report? Mr. Takaki, it looks like we've got one more quarter remaining, it appears, and to date we've awarded $20,646,606 and thereabouts. We do have budgeted 119, almost 120 million. Are we confident that this last quarter will sort of catch up?
To begin with, the $20.6 million is as of March 31st, so it's been quite a while since then. The fiscal year, at least for us, will end in the next couple weeks. We have a number of projects out to bid right now. We are confident that we will spend or at least encumber the funds allocated for our projects. I don't know if any other division wants to say anything else, but.
Any other divisions with CIP want to add to that, or field, or IT?
I opened bid already, ready to get ready to award.
Yeah, Mike, field operations that has a large meter transponder project that's already gone out to bid. We're processing it for award shortly. The fourth quarter has been very busy, and we only have a couple more weeks to go here.
2 more weeks.
Okay.
Three, well, 2.5. 2.5. We're going down to the wire.
Busy time of year, I guess.
Busy
It
time of
ends
year.
on
All
June
right.
30th. So. Okay.
Okay, well, members, any further questions?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Takaki.
All right, next item for information, recruitment status. Chair recognizes Michelle Thomas.
Good afternoon, Board Chair Andaya and board members. Unfortunately, every time I have the report, I seem to get sick, so please bear with me.
Listen carefully.
I'm here to provide you with the quarterly status update for our recruitment activities for the third quarter, which is February 2019 to April 2019. For the period of February 2019 to April 2019, we have had 15 new hires, 5 promotions, 1 demotion, 1 transfer, 12 separations, 29 new approvals to fill, and 4 canceled requests. We are continuing to ramp up our recruitment efforts, as mentioned earlier in the budget report, and If you have any questions regarding that, please feel free to ask any questions.
Right, members, any questions? If not, I would note that it looks like we have a record, or at least for the year, we're at our high for the year in terms of current employees at 537.
Yeah, actually, we actually have even more employees right now because our vacancies are a little less than what is noted on this current report, but in the next year report, it will reflect that information for you.
Good. Maybe hopefully it's the start of a trend.
Cross our fingers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
For Michelle?
Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much. Thank you for the report.
Thank you, Michelle.
Next item for information is the status update of groundwater levels at all index stations. Chair recognizes Mr. Barry Uskawa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. As of April, there are no aquifer index wells in low groundwater status for the, and the production was 142 million gallons per day. Getting into the warm summer months, the 142 is about 5 million gallons over the 5-month moving average, so higher than the average. But the rainfall index for April was 62% on normal, and the 5-month moving average was 76%. From February 2018 to February 2019, our average rainfall was above normal, but from March, it's been dropping below normal. It does fluctuate with weather. And speaking of weather, the National Weather Service is forecasting below normal rainfall for May. They're doing it on a monthly basis at this time, but they also recently released an advisory of a weak El Nino that may result in approximately, I think it was 5 to 8 tropical cyclones in 2019. And in an El Nino year, we usually get drier winters and more storms. So we'll continue to monitor that. We have an Oahu Drought Committee meeting in June, so I will be able to report on that either June or July, depending on when that occurs. But the water levels have been fairly high because of the long-term rainfall. They are showing slightly decreasing trends, which is typical as you get into the summer months. But it's a good thing that the water levels are still at an elevated height. So it should help us get through this summer. With that, any questions?
Members, any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Just to put things in perspective, last season, I think the projected number of tropical cyclones was less than what they're projecting for this season. And remember how close we came to actually getting hit by Hurricane Lane last season. So just a reminder for everybody to be prepared, get your emergency supplies together, get your family plans together. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Lau. Last item for information is our water main repair report for April 2019. Chair recognizes Mr. Mike Fuke.
Thank you, Chair Andar. Good afternoon, Chair and other board members.
You have a PowerPoint for us today.
It's a first.
I'm going to get to it. I'll get to it.
All right, moving in.
The month of April, we had 26 main breaks. The most significant break that we had was the 42-inch pipe that is right next to the transfer station along the bike path. That was a pretty scary place because, especially at night, because you don't know who was sleeping in the middle of the road. So it was a kind of spooky place. The leak detection team did 36 miles of surveys. We found 4 leaks that was repaired before it became a major issue. The last board meeting, it was requested that we have the amount of hours that we spend to repair the mains. The 6 and 8 inch, it takes us approximately, well, in April anyway, the average hours was 17 hours. The 12 inch took us 27 hours, and the 42 inch took us 78 hours. There are many factors that goes into how long it takes us to repair. Obviously, size is one thing. The depth of the main is another. Is there any traffic in the area? Are there any utilities that's also crossing our main? And the location of the main. For example, the 42, we had tidal impacts. So there were times where we basically had to slow down, so wait for low tide. Coquille Street is another example where we had tidal impacts, and this is just the start. With sea level rise coming, these kind of impacts are going to get more and more and more. So it does impact how we do things. And another one, which is going to relate it to the PowerPoint, is the complexity of the repair that we must do. Last week, Thursday, we had a main break at the intersection of, this is Mailili Road, this is Pa'akea, right in the middle of the intersection here. Okay, at this intersection, we have a 20-inch main that comes down Pa'akea, turns right, goes up Mailili. Also going up Mailili is a 12-inch line, and also coming up Mailili from Farrington Highway by the Comprehensive Health Center is another 12-inch line. They all converge at this intersection, and we had a main break at this intersection. That was Thursday morning, roughly 4:30 a.m. We got it done yesterday at 6:30 p.m. Okay, it's not that mean we work continuously through, but there are times we have to stop and assess and see what we got to do. But still yet, it took us a long time to get it done because this was a very complex repair. This is a field sketch of what, first thing we had to do was find out what he had, and this is a 20-inch that comes down along Pa'akea. This is a 20-inch that goes up Mailiili. This line is the 12-inch that comes up from Farrington Highway, and this is the this is the 12-inch that goes also up Mailiili. At the intersection, all three lines converged. Okay, what makes this one difficult, this is a 20-inch concrete cylinder T. This is the existing condition that we found it. Okay. We also had a 20-inch valve here that was broken, so we could not close this valve and isolate the 20-inch. By the way, 20 inch is really important because that feeds Waianae, Makaha, great amount of water. I give credit, Kevin's group, the water system ops people credit because they got it managed so that we could still maintain service. And they gave us more time to do the repair. Okay, this is also complicated because it's all flange piping in here. Usually we don't have flange piping, but we do. Flange piping is a very rigid pipe. It's not, you don't have much flexibility. Here we had a 20 by 12 T, concrete cylinder T, which brought this line. By the way, this line is an AC pipe and transitioned to cast iron here. The break occurred right at the face of this T. We think the T sunk, which caused this joint to pull apart. But when we went in here and excavated, we found this joint here on this T to be very bad shape. We were considering welding, but then we came to the point where the welders told us doesn't look very good, and he wouldn't recommend we do any weld on that. Okay, understand this is all 20-inch all the way around this way. Likewise, we had a 20-inch elbow and a 90-degree elbow here, and this piece here, the 20 by 12 reducer. It's a cast iron, it's a 20 by 12 ductile iron flange reducer. This was the key piece for us to do this repair because we didn't know we don't have concrete cylinder pieces with us in our yard. We don't have it. This was installed at the time when Amron was present locally and they were manufacturing concrete cylinder pipe. But unfortunately, Amron is no longer in our market here in Hawaii. Okay, so we were having difficulty. Understand too, we also had this 20-inch valve that was broken. Okay, this is a detail of how we repaired it. Actually, we used this part here up until here. And this was because the field's crew who was working out there, the whole crew, the entire crew, Wayne Tello, Rob Otterdyke, Andy Berengue, Danny Lee. We all kind of like, okay, guys, what do we see, how we can repair this? It was a joint effort. We really put our heads together trying to figure out what can we do. And remember I talked about the reducer on this side. So we moved that reducer to here. So it enabled us to bring it down from a 20-inch down to a 12-inch. And once we get to the 12-inch, then in our yard, in our inventory, we have all the pieces to make the repair. Okay. Now our materials, the only thing I had to worry about was this spool right here. Okay. We did not have this flange by plane and spool. And we called our vendors. Unfortunately for us, two major vendors it was Labor Day weekend, and they were on a 3-day weekend. So they weren't working on a Saturday. Okay, but we were lucked out because just so happened one person was in the yard at the time we called. He said, okay, I got it, so he got it for us. And this is another key so that we could make, basically, we changed this to a 12-inch valve, and it was a 12-inch line from the valve all the way around, and we made the connection. Likewise, making the connection down here, okay, to this AC pipe. Okay, okay, this is the 12-inch that goes down to Farrington Highway. This is a 20-inch, where'd it go? This is the 20-inch that comes from along Parkea. This picture does not show the other 12-inch. It was taken before that was installed. This is the 12-inch valve that we installed. This is the reducer that we relocated from the other side. Okay, so we used, here is a 12 by 12 T connected up. We used Megalux to make everything rigid because we did not want to wait for the concrete to set for this reaction block. So this is what it is. So sometimes it doesn't seem a lot, but the complexity of this was pretty big. So we were there Thursday, basically whole weekend. Gives the crews credit. They worked through Sunday, Monday, Labor Day. They gave up their time, and to get this repair done. Roughly about 100 hours to get this thing done. Okay. Any questions on anything?
Members, any questions? If not, thank you very much, Mr. Fuke, and please thank the entire crew. We really appreciate everything that your crew does to get these repairs done.
I'll pass the message along. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mike, for the shoring and the ladder.
I think that was the most interesting part of the meeting.
I think it deserves a hand for its first part.
Robert, this is your second bite at the apple, so. But we'll definitely, again, we'll miss you, Robert. Thank you. All right, there being no further items on the agenda today, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Is there any other further business, Mr. Manager?
No, no other business.
All right, let's take a vote and then let's make sure to give Member Soar the call and tell him we need to come back. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You don't have to go to extremes to save water. For easy water-saving tips, visit boardofwatersupply.com.